So I think that might be the perfect time to get started with our first panel.
I can do an introduction to myself.
No, that's okay. I'll kick it off. I didn't know if the digital group was going to get us started, but I'm happy to jump in. Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending the Digital Summit. I'm excited to kick it off with our panel today. We're going to be talking about the single family for rent sector and its impact on the renter experience. Earlier, as we were all gathering, I heard Reed talk about the different acronyms. And yes, there have been lots of acronyms in this space, and I'm hoping today we can clarify some of them. I am Jenny Hart. I'm with Real Foundations. We've been working, our firm has been working in the multifamily and for sale residential space for about 30 years. We became active in the SFR space, which is single family for rent. There's our first acronym of the day, in 2012. And in the last 10 years, we've worked with 7 of the largest institutionally owned SFR portfolios, clients that include names like Invitation Homes, which you may have heard of. But then in 2019, we started to see momentum building in a new subsector of SFR called Build for Rent, also known as Build to Rent, BTRB, the number 2R, and BFR. So we have these 3 acronyms circulating. The industry hasn't quite landed on the final name yet, so you still hear those 3 interchangeable. But today we're going to reference it as BFR. So anyway, in 2019, we started to see this new subsector of Build for Rent. And these are communities of detached single-family homes or townhomes purposely built as a community of rentals. Since then, Real Foundation's been fortunate to work with many emerging players in the sector. These are startups or BFR-only players, as well as multifamily developers, home builders, and scattered site SFR owners who've moved into the space. The emergence of these new sectors has dramatically improved the landscape of housing choices available to renters and the type of resident experiences operators can deliver. So while the overall sector, the size of the sector is small relative to multifamily, it continues to grow at a fast clip. Hunter Housing Economics, they forecast that BFR will add 150,000 new units year over year for the next 4 to 5 years. That's quite a fast growth of the sector. The impact of these changes cannot be understated and are just starting to play out in terms of their influence on the multifamily and home building industries. So today we're going to talk about all of that, and we've assembled a panel of SFR and BFR experts here. They're going to share a wide range of perspectives. Their companies own and or manage portfolios of every type of product that you see in the sector, and that ranges from scattered, detached single-family homes for rent to purpose-built single-family home communities. And their geographies cover the Sun Belt from Arizona to Texas and Florida north to the Carolinas. And their renter households range from families with school-aged children to single empty nesters. So let's jump in and meet our panelists. First up is Todd Gorelick. He's the Senior Managing Director and Co-Chief Executive Officer of Bridge Single Family Rental. Todd, thanks for being here today. I'd love for you to just introduce your organization, describe its role. Do you own your portfolio? Do you provide third-party management services? Give us a sense of the size and geography so we can kind of put all of the panelists in context.
Sure. Thanks, Jenny. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
So I have to apologize. I'm actually in what I thought was a quiet corner of an airport club at LaGuardia, and they just started doing construction. And so it's a complete disaster. We'll see how this goes.
Well, you sound like you're in a podcast studio. It sounds like
all right. Well, I found this.
Sound great.
Okay, good. Yeah, so our business was recently acquired by Bridge Investment Group, and we're the SFR division. We started the business in scattered site in 2012. Then we internalized property management in 2016 and 2017. We manage over 4,500 units, primarily located in 11 geographic markets. Those are concentrated in the Southeast, Florida, Texas, the Midwest, and a couple of scattered places there. I think you can probably hear the construction behind me. Our portfolio comprises both scattered site, that's the majority of it, but in the last couple of years, we've been doing build for rent, largely stubs, existing neighborhoods or neighborhoods that are being built. So we'll take builder closeouts. We might take a small phase of a neighborhood. We serve median income households. Our rents are typically in the $1,600 a month range, and virtually all of our inventory is 3 bedrooms, some for a little bit of 5 bedroom. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Todd. Next up, we have Joya Pavisi, Executive Vice President of Marketing and Strategy for RKW Residential. Joya, if you can give us a similar idea of the size and scale of your organization and your focus in this particular sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. RKW Residential is an exclusively third-party property management company. We don't own any of our assets. We just manage and provide service to our clients. We've got 35,000 units under management and consulting today. Had a fast and exciting growth period since we started the organization in 2015. We manage primarily Class A multifamily assets, but in 2018, we started picking up some build to rent, build for rent communities. And today we've got about 5,000 build to rent communities, either under management or we are currently actively consulting through the development phase for those communities. In fact, last week we just picked up 3 more deals with D.R. Horton. So we're really excited about the build to rent space. We've been learning along the way and we're just excited where it's going. So.
Great. And finally, John Carlson is president with Mark Taylor out of Arizona. John, give us your overview, please.
Thank you, Jenny. So yes, John Carlson, Mark Taylor Residential. We are primarily in Phoenix, Arizona, but also have assets in Las Vegas, Nevada. We've developed since 1985 about 21,000 traditional garden style apartments in Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. Today, we oversee about 22,000 and change Class A only assets. We are primarily third party, so about 85% third party with ownership in about 5,500 units. I'd say that from a SFR, BTR, whatever you want to call it, Jenny, perspective, we started leasing up as a third party manager in 2017 and now have leased up thousands of units with the ramp up of that development specifically in the outer rings of Phoenix Metro. So excited to be here today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for everyone for, helping us prepare and get to this point. Why don't we just dive in with some of our questions and kind of see where this goes. So let's start with the basics. What is the product? What are the differences between single family for rent and apartments in terms of unit features and community amenities? Todd, I'll let you take this one, and knowing your firm's primarily, or primary focus in scattered single family homes. What do the scattered single family homes for rent offer that's different from apartments?
So more bedrooms, a driveway. This is all kind of obvious, and nobody's really thought about it, I don't think, because nobody's realized how big the scattered site single family rent market is. It's where we started. We're just starting to do communities, right? There are probably 15 million single family homes for rent and have been for a long time. They're just not visible. And in fact, that points to sort of a difference. They're in a neighborhood. They're much more nondescript. There's more privacy. There's a fence. There's walking in the neighborhood out your front door. There's a yard, really important. That fence is really important for pets and families. But I would say the principal difference is the 3 bedrooms, which, you know, only, I don't know, 10, 12% of multifamily is going to be able to offer 3 bedrooms and the place for a basketball goal and so forth. So you hear what I'm saying.
Well, so in the, you mentioned there's 15 million single family homes for rent, but I think the big change that's happened really in the last 10 years has been the growth of the institutional owner, as they call it. And so can you just talk about that just a little bit? Because I think that's been the game changer in the industry.
Absolutely. So on the heels of the housing crisis, there were millions and millions of homes that were underwater, folks who thought they were owners, but it turns out they were actually just renters. At least that's what my dad said. And so there needed to be new ownership for these homes. And a number of private equity firms got in the game, principally Blackstone and Starwood, Colony Capital. They started buying up homes. They didn't know if it was a trade or if it was a business. I've been going to these conferences since 2012. That was the big question the first few years. Is it a trade or is it a business? Then what happened was the big guys got together and formed an association. The first thing the association did was publish standards that public stock analysts could use to gauge performance. And that changed the game. The other thing that happened that changed the game was that a few of those institutions had pension fund backing, and a number of large public pension funds got in the game very early. And after a few years, a couple of these guys went public. You mentioned Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, a couple others. And the public stock analysts started watching them. And they proved that one could actually be in the scattered site, and this is the hardest, the scattered site business, and deliver similar returns with a different risk profile to the multifamily industry. And it's now certainly gotten a lot of legs under its feet. Invitation Homes joined the S&P 500, if anybody just saw that. And we do have a lot of institutional capital coming into the game. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was great. They still estimate the institutional ownership of the single family for rent homes is around 2 and 3% today. So it's still a really small portion of the overall detached single family home market, rental home market that most think about. But then, like I mentioned in my intro, back around 2019, build for rent really started to get some traction. It's not that it just, was born in 2019. There are other providers who've been doing it for a lot longer. It was just so small, and it really wasn't called that, right? It was just sort of called cottage homes, or there were different names for it. But John, you've really seen that that big growth in Arizona. Can you sort of talk about the differences between build for rent and apartment communities, and then sort of compare it to Todd's description of the scattered home? What is the product like? What are the differences? What do you see in the communities? Because now we're talking about communities, not just a standalone home. Can you kind of help us understand that?
Sure, and I think it's important to understand the evolution of this, and I'll speak to Phoenix Metro specifically. So as a whole, Phoenix Metro has been undersupplied since 2011, or post-Great Recession. So what I mean by that is single family for sale and multifamily have been underserved or undersupplied until really this year with our delivery schedule. Prior to 2017, we had less than 1% of the purpose-built BTR SFR. What I can tell you today, there's about 35,400 units under construction, and just over 9,800, or 28% of those units are built to rent product, purpose built. So the evolution of that is, it's completely transformed itself in just 5 years in Phoenix. And we took on our first, I'll say specific purpose built, 136 units in Surprise, Arizona, in 2017. And now we have 12 assets under lease up at 1,800 units just in that space alone. So what are the differences? I think there was a tailwind effect of, in the outer ring of Phoenix Metro, you had guys buying land and starting these purpose builts, the Next Metros, the Christopher Todds, et cetera, the bungalows. And you had people seeking, I think, something new. I mean, it's not, as Todd mentioned, it's not surprising. If I'm in an outer ring and I'm looking at 1980s vintage homes, or I see this brand new product type with technology, with backyards, with direct access, all of those things, it's enticing. And it was an affordable option in brand new. So I think, you know, if you look at what are the specific differences versus traditional, having a doggy door matters, as Todd mentioned. 61% of our residents in this type of space have dogs versus 42% in our conventional, and we have 36,000 residents, so it's significant. Backyards, an 8-foot backyard versus a 15-foot backyard, we get a 65% premium. People love big backyards. Technology, I think what this space has truly done for, I'll say the renter population, indoor, just multifamily collectively, is said, okay, technology is capable of being introduced to multifamily. We've proven that out. You know, prior to that, if you were in a traditional, even mid-rise, high-rise, you did not see a lot of technology implementation for residents. But this space, it was everybody, print and repeat. We have technology available, smart locks, smart home technology, bulk Wi-Fi, all of those things. So I think that's translated into an evolution for the regular sector. So I think those are the most specific differences today. I would just add in the SFR, the larger 3 and 4 bedroom spaces, Todd mentioned, another obvious, you know, our housing stock in terms of multifamily, only 4% is 3 and 4 bedroom. So having direct access backyards, 3 and 4 bedrooms has really helped that older millennial generation that's starting to transform in a housing formation aspect and having children. So I think all of those things are significant differences.
Jenny, if I may, I think one other thing that we haven't touched on is the fact that these cluster communities are amenitized. And so that's a big difference from just single family rental. Apartments have amenities, and it is bringing the benefits of the single family rental, the detached home with the garage, the doggy door, all those things that the aging millennial or even the boomer wants, but also adding an amenity package. Not all build to rent communities have amenity packages, but the majority of the ones we manage do. And I think that that's also a big differentiator.
Can you describe what those amenity packages look like, Joya, just because I think they're a little bit different than the conventional multifamily?
Yeah, they're smaller in scale. The number of amenity spaces is less. So it's typically there's going to be a community pool. There may be a clubhouse, but much smaller, not necessarily having a game room like you would expect at a multifamily community. They do have, you know, more outdoor spaces, whether that be mini courtyards or garden areas or pet parks.
What is the size of these communities? How many units in the build for rent community is on average? John?
Yeah, for us, so our traditional portfolio is about 293 units on an average size basis. The subset of lease ups that I described earlier, that's 144 units. So a significant difference in that regard. So, you know, a question we've been trying to solve is how do we staff them appropriately, you know, based on maybe a traditional multifamily model with evolution of technology happening and the focus on centralized leasing.
Right. So we'll get to that in a minute, but it's interesting just to kind of highlight what you just said, that the build for rent communities are about half the size of the traditional multifamily communities. So everyone just kind of keep that in mind as we're going through this conversation. In terms of square feet, is there a big difference on build for rent versus the average apartment, let's say, 1,000 square feet and has been shrinking? What do you see typically in a build for rent unit?
For us, I mean, it's two differences. So if you look at the 1 and 2 bedroom type communities, the Next Metros, the Christopher Todds, they're about 860 square feet, 1 and 2 bedrooms. Our traditional size is slightly larger, so just say 960 for our tradition. And then if you jump to the BB Living 3 and 4 bedrooms, those are 1,850 to 1,900 square feet. So, you get a nice variety there based on your need as a resident.
And I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So across our portfolio, the average square footage is about 1,800 square feet. But for the existing secondary stock, the non-built for rent scattered site, it's going to be more in the 1,500 to 1,600 range. And our new build for rents are going to be 1,900 to 2,400.
Interesting. Okay, great. So a pretty big range within that. And so how do these different product types attract a different customer? John, Arizona probably has like one of the most diverse set of build for rent. What are you seeing there? You mentioned there's 1, 2, and 3, 4 bedroom units that are in your portfolio. And so is the build for rent resident really all that different from the apartment resident? Because we're talking about the same bedrooms. Like what are you seeing as the difference?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's certainly a renter by choice. So we're Class A only. So our average household income for our entire portfolio of 36,000 residents is just over $107,000. If I look at, we like to say demographics typically don't travel, meaning if you're in a certain zip code, the average household income is about the same. However, and we've looked at this ad nauseum in terms of different submarkets, and I'll give you one example. Surprise is in the Northwest Valley, a nice affluent suburb in Northwest Valley of Phoenix. Their average household income in terms of a collective is $71,000. We have 3 lease-ups there right now, and the average household income within those 3 lease-ups is about $103,000. So those are renters by choice for sure, looking at those outer rings. And then, probably more aligned with what Todd mentioned in terms of the larger 3 and 4 bedrooms, that's even higher. So we have average household demographics there of $136,000. And that age is about 42. Our 1 and 2 bedrooms is average age is 38, and then our portfolio collect is 34. So you have a slightly older millennial with family startups, probably dual income. So you're seeing that demographic shift as they age.
Interesting. And so Joya, what about you? What are you seeing? Who's the build for rent resident, and what do they want out of the build for rent?
Yeah. So if you look across our portfolio, a third of our build to rent residents are 50 plus. And so there's sort of that downsizing boomer story. But if you really start to drill down by specific asset and their location, what we're seeing is a lot of that is driven by it's either communities located in Florida or communities located on the coast. And so those are typically retirement destinations. So it makes sense that the demographic there is older. If we're looking at a more, not coastal, not Florida, we are seeing that drop by about 10% as far as the number of older residents that we have. And then we see an actual like a 10% jump in families. So, and it is primarily those 30 somethings with kids, that early family formation time frame. And as far as what they want, I think that location still is incredibly important. If you are there, I think that the renter is willing to be in the suburbs, not necessarily having to be in an urban walkable location, because they do want that space, but they still want to be in close proximity to some sort of entertainment or shopping district, some sort of destination location where they have all of the benefits that they would have if they were living closer into a city. We have seen some of our assets built in even more tertiary markets outside of locations that have, you know, close proximity to those type of entertainment districts, and they're a lot harder to lease up. It's a lot harder to attract people to come out into those areas. So I think location is incredibly important, and because we are talking about, you know, young families, school district is important. So those are some factors to consider, but I would say location still reigns supreme when it comes to picking a site for any community.
And Todd, what about your residents, given your product is different and the scattered site model? So what are your renters looking for, and what's the profile of geographies or locations that are meaningful to you?
I would say the most important distinction is that we're focused on median income households. And today's world, that means $70,000-ish per year. Our segment is needs to rent, but doesn't need assistance to rent. And that is going to be a primary driver. Our schools are going to be an average rating of, let's say, a 4. But in the newer communities that we're building, it might be a 6, maybe, right? Schools are really are important. Crime, we pay very close attention to. These are things that, you know, I think a number of the multifamily industry, because it's skewed younger, tends to not focus on as much as we do, which are just some of the basics. We care more about what we're not near than what we are near. Apart from employment, we need to be close to employment.
Interesting. And what about marketing approaches? You know, how are you making the renters and the prospects aware of this new product type, or just the availability of a professionally managed scattered site, you know, sort of single family home? Are you having to use different marketing approaches, and what is the typical lease up like? Joya, I'll let you lead us off on this one.
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the biggest differences being coming from multifamily, and we've done a lot of lease ups over the past 7 years. And one of the biggest differences is the pace of delivery. We're receiving anywhere from 10 to maybe 15 homes per month, whereas with the typical multifamily, you could be receiving anywhere from 35 to 75 units or a whole building all at one time. So you have to pace your advertising spend in accordance to what is being delivered. And that also impacts how you staff, right? So having less people, or there's a need for a smaller leasing team. I also think that in general, you just have to consider how you are positioning the community on the website. Are you talking about the things that matter to this renter, the space, the yard? Are you selling the benefits of things that you would get with homeownership, like the garage, the yard, but also the benefits of the rental lifestyle, you know, having maintenance included, lawn care taken care of? It's really paying attention to how you're positioning the asset and selling the features and benefits of it, what's different on the website. I think also what we found is, for certain assets, and this is really location dependent, we have to lean into more traditional marketing strategies. As a multifamily marketer, we've been really heavy on digital, and digital has been extremely successful for us. But as we have gotten deeper into build to rent, we have learned that we need to do things like have heavier site signage. We need to lean into realtor partner relationships. Last week, one of our assets got 5 of their 9 leases from being able to syndicate out to the MLS through a realtor partnership. So that's been incredibly important. Having, you know, many open house events, the more traditional strategies are things that we are starting to adopt more and more, as opposed to just having a strictly digital lead generation strategy. I also think it's really important to understand how the prospects are searching and what they're looking for. This demographic, this renter, wants a single family home, or they want a townhome. And so they're using the filters on the ILS sites to filter out apartments and find the asset type that they're looking for. And so coming from multifamily, we sort of plugged in all of our typical multifamily tech or multifamily strategy when we first started. And what we realized pretty quickly is that the multifamily syndication feed doesn't push out when your listing will not show up when the prospect or the renter is filtering out apartments. And so we've had to implement different tech, different syndication feeds in order to be able to feed out to the ILSs and to be included in those filtered searches.
The ILS feed is the game changer here within this space for sure. You know, if I'm a renter looking for this home, sometimes I think they don't know where to start because I'm looking for a 3-bedroom home to rent. again. And so Todd, that's really been your experience as well. How are you, what has been your secret to leasing up? I mean, the demand has been pretty huge, but still you've got to make them aware of your portfolio. And then, how are you showing them these homes? What's the trick there?
I mean, if anybody's got any secrets, I'd love to hear them. Our business was effectively an outgrowth of the traditional home sales business. Everyone really started using third-party property managers who were largely realtors of single-family homes.
Right.
And so we lease one by one. Even in our build-for-rent communities, we are just delivering a few at a time because we're taking 20, 30, 40 homes in a community, and they are delivered, as Joy has said, relatively slowly. As such, we don't have a legacy of microsites marketing a community, right? We started really with yard signs, and we had the luxury when we started our business of being an early adopter of self-showing. And so our systems, our property management system feeds into we use a particular vendor called Rently, and Rently will connect to either a lockbox that can be remotely opened or a smart lock. And we have really never shown a home. None of our people have ever shown a home in person. There are a few markets where occasionally realtors will help tenants, be representing tenants, and will want to get into the home. Well, they just go and take them on the self-tour. That does mean that we have to send crews around periodically to check and make sure that the condition of the homes remains okay. And surprisingly, we've had hardly any issues with self-showings over many thousands, tens of thousands. I don't know, but maybe even 100,000 showings.
Yeah, I'd like to say that the Scattered SFR was doing self-guided tours before they were cool. Before COVID hit, you really, the SFR, the Scattered SFR sector really proved that was possible, that you could lease up a unit, a home, without an in-person, an agent-led tour. So I think that was a huge predictor of what was to come in the multifamily space. But that also brings up sort of the core, one of my core interests here is about the staffing. So John, I'll kind of let you lead this one off. How different is the staffing model? You're focused on, your firm deals with the conventional, or what you're calling the traditional multifamily, and now you're doing the build for rent. So you're right on the front line, sort of seeing the difference and sort of going back to your original point that, the conventional multifamily is about 300 units. The build for rent is about half that or even smaller. And so how are you, what are the new operating models and staffing models that you're experimenting with and putting out in the market to make sure these communities are operated efficiently?
Let me stage it. I think, going back to 17, we attempted to operate like a traditional multifamily with our staffing levels. We're still doing that to some degree, but then you fast forward to the pandemic. You look at NMHC's survey from 2022, 55% of people don't care if anyone tours them around, to Todd's point. And then you look at the data between SmartRent and iApartments. If you look at self-guided tour scheduling, the 3 most toured times are when? 2 before 9 a.m. and 1 after 6 p.m. Well, most of them open when? 9 to 6 or 9 to 5. So clearly, many of us are not listening to our customers. So we have to adapt. And I think if you look forward, hit the forward button, you're going to see a model that's completely different. And I give a lot of credit to what Todd said, the scattered home efforts of self-guided tours and staffing these different without compromising service levels. So we always want to tailor a white glove service for our employees and residents. but how do you do that with technology? So we're looking at leveraging that through our centralized command center, which we've been building for about 18 months. And I think the old model of one employee per 100 units is essentially dead. We're just adjusting as we roll forward. So we'll see how that translates long term. But I think, you know, how we operate in 2024, 2025 will be completely different than you know, even 3-4 years ago.
Interesting. Well, so then Todd, back to you. You know, since SFR is the scattered SFR owners are helping us learn about the how to run an unstaffed or a staffless portfolio, meaning on-site staff. You know, how do you provide service to residents when there is no on-site office to walk into? What happens, and how are you bringing those lessons into your build for rent portfolio?
So it really is an economic necessity for us. It's literally impossible to you know, have dedicated staff for certain homes. Drive times actually matter, and availability matters. You really have no choice other than, at least for some of your capacity, to be absorbed by vendors. We really didn't want to build a repair and maintenance business, and we may yet add significant field superintendents and techs to our team. We've got some who handle some things, handle some escalations, but mostly what they're involved in is overseeing third parties. We contract with the national vendor. This particular one is called SMS Assist. They handle a very significant portion, for example, of Invitation Homes requirements. And Invitation actually has its own techs dispatched by this large vendor manager. So they run a call center, they white label the call center. They've got maintenance portal, smartphone stuff, pretty much everything we need in one spot. They handle all of the billing and payments. One thing I ought to just bring up in the context of the traditional multifamily model, where your staff is typically charged to the property and maybe dedicated to the property or two properties. The legacy SFR business doesn't work that way. Staff is paid from property management fees, which are typically set at a much higher level, sort of in the 6, 7, 8, 9% range, much higher actually among small property managers, of which there are many tens of thousands who've been doing this business for a long time. So reconciling those differences, if you've got different kinds of owners, is probably a pretty big challenge.
Agreed. And so Joya, I'll send it over to you. As Todd just mentioned, yeah, there's different management approaches out there, whether you come from the SFR, a scattered site managed perspective, or you come from the traditional multifamily perspective. How is your firm looking to serve your clients who are the owners of these communities with an efficient operating model that also still delivers an appropriate level of service to the residents? What are you seeing in terms of the trend there?
So this year we've spent a significant amount of time really building out our centralization models, specifically around certain roles. For example, the assistant manager role, that can be centralized. It can be an allocation-based role. It can support multiple communities and multiple clients. So whereas previously it's been very challenging, or ownership groups did not want to share staff, we're starting to see the adoption of that idea. They're more willing to share staff with other ownership groups if it means that it's less, overhead for the asset. And so really looking at centralization, sharing staff across sites is what we're doing right now.
And that leads me to my next question. What are the critical technology solutions that need to be in place, or maybe even don't exist today to enable that to happen? What are the things that are working for you? What are the things you wish, what are the solutions you wish you had? John, I'm going to jump that over to you, and Joy, I'll come back.
Okay.
Yes, for us, so we've been building our own software in a variety of ways for the last 4 years. One key piece being what we call single office. So if you think about the traditional multifamily PMS, and I'll pick on Yardi and RealPage because they're two massive companies that we all know of. If you think about a leasing consultant today or a manager logging in, they're logging into a, just say a 3-digit code, 123, and that's a property. So when you go to them and say, hey, I need to have access to 5 or 6 based on what Joya mentioned and shared personnel, the wires and the smoke start to come out of the ears. So, we've decided to build our own. And I think what it allows us to do is really measure our performance. To, Joya's credit, we have to figure out a way to share staff, but we also have to measure them and ensure that we're creating a higher experience or better experience for our residents, and ensure that our ownership group gets it, right? Because there is, a lot of rewiring for owners saying, yes, we're going to share staff, we're going to create efficiencies for you, and we're better for everybody. So I think that's something that's critical for our success. And then I think on the service side, we partner with HappyCo TAS, and all of these things to create digital turn boards and digital access to our service technology and phones for people. So, I think all of these things are really about efficiencies and leveraging technology to make sure that we're as efficient as possible long term. And I think for us, we're at the infancy of that, but I think in 24 months, we'll have it. I'll say 2.0 will be released at that point, and we'll be working completely different.
Well, John, you brought up a good point, the rewiring and rewiring of I'll call it the clients, and then also the residents. And Joya, I'll bring this back to you. Clients probably who we've heard this from our clients, that there are some ownership groups who believe that it's super important to have a on-site team, right, to deliver that level of service. And so, but then the resident really wants this technology-enabled sort of frictionless experience. It's effortless, and they may not actually ever step foot in a leasing office, for example. So how are you sort of reconciling, does the resident really care if somebody is on site so long as they're happy with their living and experience? How are you sort of reconciling the two?
So I think the jury is still out on that conversation, to be honest with you, but I will tell you at RKW, we this year have deployed a new resident app that is really focused on the resident experience, where everything that you can think about that involves your home, whether that be paying your rent online or submitting your maintenance request, but also going even further to providing offers with national partners, discounts, or being able to book services like pet walking or in-home cleaning. All of that is built into one app. So residents don't have to have all of these different apps or different contacts that they have to go out and connect with in different ways in order to service their home or to have their home managed in one place. It's really kind of this idea of one-touch living through one single app. And that's really one of the ways that we're leveraging technology. I think the other thing is really thinking about that lead nurturing before they're a resident. How do we, with limited staff or shared staff, how do we make sure that we are available, we are immediate in our response to prospects who are interested in getting information, and how are we consistent in nurturing that lead to ultimately convert them into a resident? And so for us, what we've done is we left one of the big shops that John mentioned. We left their CRM system and employed a new CRM system that allows our team to have access to multiple sites so they can toggle and support more than one community with different ownership groups. And the technology also has built-in AI virtual leasing agents. So again, getting back to that, having somebody that is available 24/7, is able to field some upfront questions and then keep that lead warm while our reduced staff count stands on the side and waits to pick up the lead when it's ready to be converted.
Yeah, the lead nurturing, the automated leasing assistants have come a long way and really are a game changer for that segment of the customer journey. But what about just expectations on the residents? Todd, you probably said it best during our practice. Are there different things that we're asking our residents to do that they maybe didn't have to do in their apartments, and how are they reacting to that?
Yeah, so potentially more applicable to scattered site than full managed communities, especially if there's on-site management. But this could be applicable to smaller unmanaged communities without staff right there. They're coming out of apartments. Most of our residents, so our average age is in the low 30s. It is when these households start forming that their preferences move from apartments to single family. And they don't have experience necessarily in a single family home other than perhaps have grown up in one. Changing air filters is actually a whole company has grown, called, used to be Filter Easy. I think they're Second Nature now, right? They built a company around this idea of distributing air filters to scattered site single family. Just the maintenance that may be required of the home, learning how to deal with the garbage disposal, it just runs the gamut. And so we have to, we have pretty high self-maintenance requirements for our residents. We produce videos for how to do various things. We have to tell them not to do certain things like clean the gutters. It really does run the gamut.
I've even heard changing light bulbs that folks that are moving out of apartments have to learn how to change a light bulb when they move.
Beware of high ceilinged foyers.
Yeah, right, exactly. They can't do that themselves. John, anything you're seeing as far as technology solutions that are really sort of enabling that resident experience you mentioned earlier? Y'all are building out your own software to really enable that centralized hub. Is there anything on the customer facing side that you've seen that it's been really useful?
Well, I think as Joy mentioned, us building our own CRM helped us understand how to meet the customer's needs, and our AI tool is called Hobbs. He works 24/7. He's very busy, but he's scheduling about 62% of our actual tours at this point, because we are still doing tours primarily. So I think it's meeting the resident at the level of contact that they are requiring. But also I think it's about us and them changing behavior. What I mean by that is, post-pandemic, we are now scheduling appointments for residents. So I like to use the simple analogy. No one goes to their doctor's office anytime they want just to pop in and say hi to Dr. Hart. That never happens. So why do we allow that to happen, right? Let's make sure that we're allowing for a better experience, meaning we're isolating through our scheduler 30 minutes for that resident to have one-on-one time with a manager so that there's no interruptions and we can give them the level of service they want. So I think all of these things are in transition, and it's going to be incredibly interesting to see how that plays itself out long-term.
I agree wholeheartedly. So as we look across all the rental housing sectors, we really see this convergence happening. You can sort of see it on the call today, right? From the scattered SFR to the build for rent, and then multifamily, and then even for sale housing. I mean, I think one of the stats I read was 25% of the residents living in build for rent have moved there from a house they owned. And that's just because they prefer that rental lifestyle. Those would be sort of the renters by choice. But you really see, sort of the resident is coming from all these different perspectives. And it's on the flip side, the industry as well. Where do you think it's going? And John, I'll let you lead this one off. I mean, Arizona has been sort of the birthplace of all of these different product types kind of really, gaining real traction. I mean, I heard at one point a couple of years ago, just the amount of people going out to Arizona to tour kind of quote horizontal apartments, which are sort of the next Metro and Christopher Todd model. Where do you see it going 2025, 5 years? Well, no, it's not 5 years. It's, that'd be 3 years.
I look at it in two capacities. One, it's technology, right? Technology is driving behavior, and behavior is changing, and that's on, ownership, residents, employees collectively. So I think that's one piece. So we're still figuring that out, but that will change dramatically in terms of how we operate. I think two, if you look at the product evolution, so if I go back to the first project ever toured for Next Metro in Tucson, this was years ago, I think 2015 or 14. And I was looking for the leasing office because I had no idea there wasn't one. And just looked like square boxes, and I didn't get it. Then I looked at the market survey, and rents were higher than the traditional multifamily. So that's when the light bulb went off. I think today we're in 2.0, meaning, we've done a nice job of creating a better product type. But what I can tell you is I look with multiple developers and owners and look at their renderings and their thoughts and their ideas for 3.0. I can only tell you that I'm excited about 2024 and beyond, because these new product types are substantially different. I'll say it that way, in terms of finish levels, design, all of the differences that are being created because of what we learned over the last 5 years. So I think that's what I'm most excited about. So the interesting component will be, with rates where they are today, from a affordability purchasing aspect, does this just force more people into this space? Probably. As hawkish as Powell and the Feds are today, I don't see that transitioning anytime soon. So the 3% mortgage rate that we were excited about for 10 years is gone. When does that come back? I have no idea, but I think this space fills a void for that resident long term.
Yeah, and Joya, what about on the client side? How do you see your client roster evolving? You mentioned earlier on, one of your clients is D.R. Horton, or for sale home builder, moving into the rental home space. How do you see that client roster evolving? And then on the other side, are you seeing a lot of third-party managers of, the NMHC top 50? Or, do you see a lot of them, have they moved into the space already, or is it still early days?
Yeah. Well, there's billions of dollars being poured into build to rent. So we are seeing single family, for sale developers now holding on and turning that into a rental product, and they are becoming our clients. They were never our clients before. And then we're seeing a lot of our clients that are traditional multifamily developers start to develop build to rent. And so it's a different book of business with them. So that's sort of how the evolution of our client, it's really different people getting into different spaces, different development types. But as far as the top 50 goes, if you look, Greystar's in the space, Cushman's in the space, Asset Living is in the space. They're just 3 of the top 5 out of the top 50. So I think there's a lot of interest. I think third-party managers are primed to take that on. Jenny, I know you mentioned during our prep call that you were part of an exercise with Rangewater, kind of helping them build out what that platform looks like. So I do think you will see a lot of third-party property managers moving into the build-to-rent space. And I do think it's early, and some people have had a head start. John, clearly you've got a head start. Your team's been in it since 2017.
Well, and then Todd, Joya sort of did the segue for me. When you're billions of dollars that are looking to get into the space, and it's always sort of the headline. What's going to happen now that the market is changed so much? I'll talk about the, the for sale home building model and how much the demand for sale homes has decreased, since the height of the pandemic, when the market was so hot and so many people were buying homes sight unseen, and the lineup of second and third place bids and that sort of thing. But what's going to happen with all this capital sitting on the sidelines? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the tea leaves are relatively clear. The mortgage payment for the median income, the median home, the median priced home, has gone up by more than 50% in the last year. You combine home price appreciation and rates, and it is driving more would-be owners to be renters. We know that the United States is undersupplied in housing. We've all seen the numbers. It's in the millions of units. You have now a proven institutional model for owning and operating and delivering strong NOIs for SFRs by public companies. We're in the market. We see the money. There's a ton of money sitting on the sidelines right now due to just capital markets disruption and the availability of debt and the cost of debt. But I think the starting gates have opened, and the horses are on the track, and they may be taking a little break right now, but to me, this market resembles the multifamily market of the 1970s and 80s, soon after the tax code changed and institutional capital started flowing, public capital started flowing both in debt and equity into multifamily. And the conditions are there. Market economics will drive, I think, great growth in this industry. One thing we didn't talk about, I just want to raise, is the question of understanding yield. We've struggled with this from the very beginning. How much vacancy do I sacrifice for higher rental rates? It's the key question in our business, right? The SFR market is different from the multifamily market. We don't have RealPage and Yardi with all of the live data that's supporting a yield management system. Most of our market, most of it, 97% of it, is mom and pops who own, typically fewer than 5 or 10 homes and are managed by this fragmented group. I'll be very interested to see how do we get there on that question. I'll also be interested to see, where's the meeting ground between what's effectively multifamily spread out horizontally, okay, and managed as multifamily horizontally, and the traditional single family business, where in these multifamily communities, by the way, the whole community gets sold by the owner typically, right? Not one by one. And yet one of the attractions of single family is that you've got another buyer out there who can drive value higher, prices and values of homes higher, and that's the owner occupant, right? And that has a big impact on the value of portfolios. So where do those two come together? I don't know. I think it's really interesting. First question I asked at any conference was, what's the right cap rate differential between SFR and multifamily? Still don't know the answer to that. So lots of questions, but I think the path is clear to growth.
Well, and I think embedded in what you just said is also something we didn't mention earlier, was the length of stay. It's pretty different versus multifamily. Joy, what do you see across your portfolio in terms of how the length of someone living there for build for rent? I know those are new, but versus multifamily.
Well, I think what's indicative there is we're seeing a 5 to 7% higher retention rate. in our build to rent communities versus our traditional multifamily. And, you know, Jenny, earlier you had mentioned, I think you said somewhere around like 25% of people who live in a single family home are ditching their single family homes for a rental home. And I think it's above 30% the number of multifamily renters that are leaving apartments to move into these detached single family rentals. And so there's definitely a lot of interest, a lot of people, there's a desire for the asset and the product. So I think it is indicative of people finding something that meets their needs, and they'll stay longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Todd, to your point, I've seen the average length of stay estimated by John Burns and Brad Hunter and some of the big research firms in the States. You know, the average length of stay is 3 years and up. Even as high as 5 years for the scattered home model. And so, you know, the idea of rent growth is different when you talk about that length of stay. John, how are you seeing that play out in Arizona? Are you seeing similar length of stays in your build for rent product as it compares to multifamily, which is, I think, usually around 18 months on average?
Yeah, so slightly different than Joya's data. We're about 8.5% in terms of turnover being lower for this product type. But I think, you know, you have to look at, you know, I think there's some obvious answers. If you think about the transition from, and if you look at Phoenix Metro specifically, you know, prior to 2011, we only had 11 buildings that were 5 stories or higher. So as we became an infill city, with the exception of, you know, BTR and this outer ring growth that we're seeing, I think about, you know, a demographic, someone living in a studio or 1 bedroom that wants to be in Old Town Scottsdale or downtown Tempe or at the Biltmore, because they want to be where there's a lot of action, restaurants and nightlife. But as you grow older and we marry and we have kids, I think if you get to a 3 and 4 bedroom single family rental, what's the next step, right? It's really only you're going to purchase something. So with the limitations of purchasing something today, both in terms of supply and affordability, it's really sticky. Where are you going to go? Unless you leave the market, you're not going to go back to a studio or 1 bedroom. It's just not going to happen. Your lifestyle, you need room for cribs and baby toys and all of that stuff. So I think it's an obvious answer, right? We know they're going to stay longer.
Yeah, and that customer relationship and that customer experience, resident experience, becomes super important if you know, inventory increases and they have more choice and the competition heats up. Right now, it seems that there's such an undersupply that the length of stay is only going to grow. But it'll be interesting to see how that balances out over time. Well, we're at the end of our session of our panel discussion, but up next is an opportunity to go into a breakout room and start up, you know, to answer anyone's, you know, questions you might have. You want to talk to the panelists individually. So I'm going to hand it back to Jan, who's going to help us figure out how to get into the breakout rooms. And I hope our panelists are available to stay on for another 10 minutes or so if anyone has any burning questions.
Sounds great.
Thank you for our panelists. Actually, let's give them all a huge round of applause in the chat, or if you want to use the reaction buttons, you can use them as well. I have a quick question before we jump into this Q&A. Do we want to do the Q&A in this main room and have all the panelists be here, or do we want to split them up into four separate rooms? We could do either way.
I would like for us all to stay in one room, but I don't want to, I know there's a schedule, so I'm not sure if there's another panel starting here at 10:30 Mountain Time, or how that's working.
We actually have 15 minutes in the schedule right now, so we could just
great.
stay here in the main room.
Here. And if there are any questions, throw them out into the chat, I guess, and then we can, and if you can direct them to somebody specifically and try to get that answered, or I'll help direct the question.
Perfect. Yes, so put the questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask it on camera, You can also click the raise hand button in the at the bottom of your screen.
Well, yeah, and I can kick us off here. I'm curious, as you guys are talking about the resident experience, and this is speaking from a single family home owner, how important the community is to our family, I guess, specifically, I'll say to my wife, and whether you've seen any differences with these build to rent communities versus what you see or experience with multifamily. And I know that there's a lot of variables, so I'll just grant that. But do you see these communities from resident to resident interacting more or more similar to what you see with, single family for sale communities, or is it, are they, just what level of engagement? And I don't even know if that's something that you guys have been monitoring, but thinking about that neighborhood Facebook page, I'll just, it's a good way of kind of serving this up. Is so critical, so valuable to a lot of homeowners, in their neighborhoods and communities. So just didn't know if you guys had any sense of what that looks like for these built to rent.
I'm happy to jump in and just share that we still host at the communities that do have amenities. We're still hosting resident events, and we have seen good turnout at the resident events. And I don't know if that's because a lot of them, as I mentioned earlier, are 50 plus. So these are people that maybe are early retirees. They're more social. They like planned and organized activities. And then something else that has been extremely popular are patio decorating contests, and seeing the entire community really get into that. And so I do think that creating that sense of community, that unity, it works, and it has been successful for us.
Cool.
Yeah, I would just add that, in Phoenix Metro, a lot of assets early in this development phase of BTR, a lot of those had very limited amenity spaces, and were overwhelmed by the demand ratio to supply. I think what we'll see, and I don't think we can ignore the data from multifamily, amenities do matter. Social engagement matters. Community matters. So, we're doing a lot of things with, I'll just use Torch Fitness through Valley Living. They have essentially a social component that's virtual. So, they'll do cooking classes for not only the entire community, but it's national. So you get to see all these great things and create engagement, and there's an ability for those residents to connect internally with their community. So I think socializing aspects matter for those communities, and I think that just adds to the stickiness long term.
In workforce housing and SFR, rents are typically set at a level which really can't support the initial investment in these types of amenities. And we really don't have visibility to that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I have one follow-up, if I can squeeze one more in. And Joya, I don't say I'm disappointed that you didn't say Tradigital, but I was waiting for it if John and Todd weren't. But specifically around marketing or advertising, can you speak to the budgets? How much those do or don't differ from, what you typically, put forward for like a multifamily community? And I don't know if you think about it on a per door basis, but what does that look like for the BTR versus multifamily?
So per door in general, whether it's for BTR or any other regular multifamily asset, that's just challenging. The smaller the community, the smaller the budget, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a discount from Google, right? When you're spending, or some ILSs have a per unit package, but it's not always affordable, depending on the unit count size. So what's different in our budget for the build to rent communities is really how we pace our spend in accordance to the delivery schedule. If you're only getting 10 or 15 homes, you don't need to generate as many leads. And so that is definitely a difference in the budget. I will tell you, most ownership groups are looking for savings. They don't want to spend as much on resident events. They don't want to spend as much on staffing the sites. And so I think it is early days, and the client, we're educating the client, we're learning, and we're passing those, that learning on to our client as we go through this.
We pay zero in marketing. Never have.
Can somebody mute Todd?
But Todd, I mean, Todd, I
Yeah.
spent some time talking with Nicole Conniff before she left Tricon, and they're huge in single family rental, all detached, you know, or not cluster, they're all scatter. And she said, we don't have to spend any money on advertising. We have signs that we put up at the home and we're leasing. And so it is different.
One of our, I should say, to your point, in deference to Digital here, I admire one of our competitors, Progress Residential, which was an early adopter of social media campaigns, paid social media campaigns, and they are about the most effective in our business. They're the biggest now. They're bigger than Invitation Homes in terms of units. They do spend money on it, and they're very effective.
And Todd, what do you attribute the I guess where you don't need marketing budget? Is it the markets that you guys are in? Is it just like the locations? Is it something else?
Yeah, it's basically there aren't enough homes. And if somebody needs a home, they go to Zillow. It does cost us money actually to list on Zillow. We don't do the extra special paid listings, but folks find it. There just aren't enough homes, and we don't have trouble getting showings, and we don't have trouble actually closing deals.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it fair to assume then that close ratios are much higher with BTR? So a normal lead to lease or tour to lease percentage in multifamily versus what you guys see in BTR?
We don't have those ratios. Our industry is too young to really have those kinds of metrics. Certainly my company is. And the traditional sort of lead to lease metrics, they in a lot of ways don't apply. I imagine they'll come and we'll figure it out. We'll learn a lot from multifamily and be able to run our business better. So I can't answer your question.
Yeah, we're still kind of in the education phase with learning this sector, learning this space, and then sharing findings with our clients. Multifamily developers that are building build to rent versus like a single family for sale product coming into it. The multifamily developers still have the expectations around high lead generation volume. They're used to, they have the multifamily mindset. And so they are looking at, you know, how many leads are we getting? How many of that is converting into actual walk-in traffic? What are we closing on? And it's just different because we're receiving so many less units. We don't need to spend that much money.
Joy, that's a really good point. And I think if you look at most multifamily developers and operators, you know, they're putting, I'll say, a digital footprint across every spectrum of ILSs and looking to, you know, spend dramatically, especially in the lease-up phase. For us, we've been ILS independent since 2018, and I know we have a brand and a significant penetration in one market, but we've really focused in on finding qualified traffic and reducing that count. I think if you go heavy on apartments.com page one, naturally you're going to get a lot of unqualified traffic. So for us being in Class A, it's a little bit different. We're focused on, I'll just say it this way, there's about 8% of Phoenix Metro that can afford our rents. So we have to be very targeted in our SEO and how we focus on that lead generation. So our new user count's up, but our leads are down by design.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the spend. I guess Todd and John, and a little bit Joya, but I often feel like in certain metros like Denver, I say, why do our customers, why are they advertising? It doesn't make sense to me. But I think what I've experienced is there are some owners and operators that don't want to question if it's not going as well as they had hoped. And so they're willing to spend, you know, a modest amount of money just to like sort of almost as an insurance policy to say like, well, if leads are down, at least not question, you know, why we tried to save $2,500, for example. Where I'm curious, and I get into this in one of my presentations later, but I'm really interested in, I guess Reed was hitting this in an internal meeting, is if you did spend, Todd, like could you raise rents, for example? So if you have more lead volume coming through, could you charge more because you have, there's more fish in your sea, if you will, like, that you could, qualify?
So one of the things that we do is we have a pre-listing where we're just testing the market. You guys may have been doing this for years. And we will set rents based on the number of hits that we see on our website. We may change rents based on the amount of self-showing traffic. We get exceptionally good reporting from the self-showing system. So I would still say that I think that we're a price taker in this market. There are a lot of these homes, and we're not really setting the rents that the market is, and we're trying to push higher in current conditions. So the answer is maybe, but I might just be fooling my asset management team.
That's super fascinating. It's actually very similar when people launch a SaaS tech product. They will put up like a splash page before they even write code. And they'll say, let's start a wait list. Hey, this is what's coming. And they'll put features up there. And then if they get 10,000, wait list people, they're like, sweet, let's build the thing. But if they don't get the wait list, they're like, all right, let's kill that and try a new one. And it's pretty typical even for companies of our size to basically put up a fake another company that doesn't exist to test the market to see how many people are interested. And then if they're interested, to then be like, oh, that's actually Digible's thing, and redirects it now to ours as we write code. So it's a fascinating concept to me that you guys might like pre-list and then also track traffic to say, hey, let's increase, our pricing, set pricing.
I had one more question. David and I will be asking questions for the next 3 hours. This one's for John, mentioning the SEO, and maybe Joya, you can weigh in here as well. We haven't talked about short-term versus long-term holds, and I don't know if, as we're saying, this is still pretty nascent, but whether there's any trends there or expectations from owners. But we often coach our own clients on this. It's like, hey, if this is a short-term hold, we probably shouldn't put as much focus on SEO because this is just going to flip and get a new name on the property, new management company potentially, et cetera. So any thoughts there? Like, is the expectation these are typically going to be more long-term, therefore there's a real value in putting more effort on the branding of the community and the SEO, or is it a similar ratio, trends is what we see in multifamily?
I just say it's typically market specific, meaning if I go back in time and look at the groups that said, oh, we want to be long-term holders and put permanent debt on, month 12 or 15, that changed with the price per unit that was happening, cap rates compressing to, 3% ish. So they immediately became merchant builders, right? Because the money, the pref for the sponsor, all those things, they overwhelmed the decision to be long-term holders. We're long-term holders. We love long-term cash flow. But I think the dynamic of the market over the last specifically 5 years, we had the most transactions in Phoenix Metro's history in 2021. And you had cap rate compression. We had deals on real numbers at, high 2.7, 2.8 cap rates. So I think it's market induced, buyer appetite, all of those things that translate into those decisions. So yes, are you going to spend a bunch of money on SEO and your standalone website if you're going to move on? Probably not. It makes the most sense for that owner, for Mark Taylor, just let's jump on the brand website. Let's lease this up thing with the right pace and exit when we can.
Cool. Thanks.
I'm not sure that I have any more to add. I think he's right. Market conditions. There was a point in time, especially last year, where any client that told us that it was long-term, you just couldn't believe it. There were so many transactions happening and so many off-market deals. That has certainly slowed down this year, which is good for third-party managers. But everything's for sale. It's just dependent on the market.
One thing this may be helpful to some of the folks who are listening. There's a scarcity of capable property management for SFRs. So I think that if a community sells, the chances that it sells with you retaining property management are probably a little bit higher than if it were a multifamily project.
Yeah, that's interesting. Makes sense.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. I think we are out of time for this session. So let's give a huge round of applause again to our amazing panelists and our moderator. And thanks for the great questions from the studio. Oh, nice.
Jan
Thank you
didn't
for
know
the
that
sound
we
effect
had-
too.
Yeah, you didn't know that, Jan. We're super advanced over here.
Nice. I will have to pack out my sound effect panels later on too.